Muslims, our brothers and sisters and children have been displaced, but let's have another conference. And the saying of the Arabs is so true. That an army of sheep led by a lion is better than an army of lions led by a sheep. The Muslims are the lions. Wallahi, we have Iman on our side, we have Tawakkul on our side. Whoever has Allah on their side, how can they lose? But our leaders are sheep. And the sheep who attack from I don't know how many thousand miles away by pressing one button, and they think they're brave, they get Hollywood to support them, and these are supposed to be men. You know, Rambo, right? All these characters. Bruce Willis, Die Hard. This guy was scared. I read an article, Steven Seagal, all these heroes, you hear about their real life, complete, you know, no men at all. But they have everything else around them. Their leaders are lions. Because they take a stand and they step up. But our leaders step up. So not women. Not being effeminate. Very important. We don't behave traits of feminism. Even as joke. We stop it, we say, no, this isn't correct. As men, we don't behave like this. Another characteristic of men is they pray salah in the masjid. The salah of the men is in the masjid in jama'ah. The women pray in the house. It's quite clear. How do you connect with being a man? That you go out, you come to the masjid, you see what the concerns of the Muslims are. You leave your house for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jalla. This is another characteristic of being a man. You pray in the masjid. Our women pray in the house. It's not enough that for now we think, okay, so I've prayed. I've prayed inshallah. I've taken the obligation off my back. La. We pray in the masjid. Allah tells us, Surah An-Nisa, verse 34, men are protectors and maintainers of women. Right there. Protectors. The Prophet Muhammad told us the sunnah to wrestle and to do archery and horse riding. All these sort of elements in combative sports. To be ready to, how are we going to protect our women if we can't protect ourselves? And this really, Allah is my witness, is not to say that we're aggressive people or we go out, but we need to be able to at least defend our families. We need to be able to defend our families. We need to be men. We need to be ready. And anyway, subhanAllah, they say that the people who do martial arts, etc., you find they always get into less trouble than people who don't. Because they have the confidence to deal with the situation. And there's something for us to know. And the Prophet Muhammad said, the strong believer is better than the weak believer. We have to think of ourselves as assets of this ummah. How are we helping this ummah? Are we just another number? Another statistic? Are we those strong believers? And maintainers of women, subhanAllah. Yeah, fine. You can only be a maintainer of a woman if you're working. You look at the statistics around Muslims and Muslim built-up areas, and the numbers who are on social security. I don't talk about those who genuinely need to be. But the Muslims who have 2 national insurance numbers, the ones who are cabbing in the evening and they're collecting social security during the day. Yeah, subhanAllah, how are you maintaining your family? Where is the barakah in the food that you put in your wife and your child's mouth? Halal isn't just a cut upon the neck. We get fixated with this thing, as long as the last cut is halal. That makes it halal. What about that Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran, feed them from what is halal and tayyib. What's good? What's good? Do you think by calling the system, the same government that we abuse and cuss, that we're taking money from them and we're feeding and sheltering our family with that there's any blessing in that we've lied to them, we've had to lie upon a form, we make up some excuses, we say she's separated from us, all these things, and we think that it's going to put some barakah in our family's mouths. The Prophet said, there's nothing better than the one who goes out and earns from his own hand. Being a man, being aware of this, that you have to look after your family, being qawamun. Another characteristic of a man is that he doesn't forsake his brothers. When your brother is in need, you don't leave him. Whether he lives next door to you, whether he's related to you, whether he's halfway across the world. We live in a very selfish society. Wallahi, we live in a very selfish society. We think, if it's easy for me to help this person, then maybe I might help them. We don't want to go out of our way anymore. If something means a little bit of effort on our part, then we don't want to do. We've forsaken our brothers. Or we only help those people that we know. But the Prophet Muhammad said that on the Day of Judgment, one of the people who will be given shade is those who love each other for Allah's sake. And that love has to manifest itself. You don't just say, oh, I love you, akhi, or I love you, brother. Yeah. It's only when it's tested that you can prove it. And this is something even I was thinking about, and I spoke to a sheikh about, and he's saying that when you help someone you know, you can't actually classify that as brotherhood because he's your friend. Maybe you're helping that person because he's helped you in the past, or there's some sort of connection there. So think about it. Is it really brotherhood? Are you helping them purely for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal? Or is it because you spend time with them and they're your friend and you have interaction with them? Giving da'wah, going out and spreading this deen. This is the sole responsibility of the men. You go to any Islamic talk today, even the dinner that we were at, the fundraising we were at earlier, 70% at least is women. You go to demonstrations. I'm not saying you go to demonstrations, but any demonstration, you go to any picket, the sisters are always first. Why? Brothers rather chill at home, watch footy. You know? SubhanAllah. It's true though, isn't it? Playing games. We're playing games. 30, 35, 40, 25. Come on. We're happy for our women to go out, to put themselves on the street. They've taken up this challenge. They're the ones who are studying the deen. They're the ones who are doing all of this. But we're men. We're men. Treating our guests well. SubhanAllah. This is, SubhanAllah, you look at Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. They say if there was a fifth rightly guided Khalif, it would have been Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. And they say that he lived, rather than living in a palace, he lived in a small mud hut. Once a woman came to his house, and she said, I need to speak to the wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. So he invited her in, she sat down, and she was speaking to his wife, and he came out and he brought some melon for them. He served his wife and her guest. And the woman said, are you not ashamed that you're not covering yourself in front of your slave? She didn't realize that was her husband. And Umar ibn Aziz said, his wife said, that's my husband. Now he served his wife and her guest. How many of us will think, nah, it's alright. Let the women do what they've got to do. Look at the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'll come to him later, inshaAllah. That he used to do the housework. Our whole paradigm has shifted. What we consider men and what we consider women. Because we attach manliness to something of this dunya. We attach chivalry to something of this dunya. But real men are those who are slaves to Allah Azza wa Jalla. Their attachment was to the hereafter. So some of the other characteristics of men is standing up for justice. Everyone knows the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you see something wrong, you should change it with your hand. If you cannot change it with your hand, then speak out against it. And if you cannot speak out against it, at least feel it in your heart. Wallahi, how many munkar, how many evils do we see every single day, and we become so oblivious to it. We don't even care about it anymore. You can't open your newspaper without seeing something really that's pornographic. You put on the TV, normal, just put on the radio. Yeah, really, we don't even consider anything wrong about it anymore. We don't think anything wrong with it. So how are we going to stand up and say this is wrong? But also the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us about anger. When a person came to him, a companion came to him and said, advise me, Ya Rasulullah. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, La taghdab. Do not become angry. And the Prophet ﷺ said, the strong one is not the one who can wrestle someone else to the ground, but the one who can control his anger. And I was thinking about this point actually, because we know from the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that there were times when he would become angry. There were times when the Prophet ﷺ would become angry. One famous example is that one of the noble women of Quraysh, she stole something. And the people came to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and said, please can you forgive her? Don't fulfill the had on her. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ became red. And he says, I swear by him in whose hand my soul is, if Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad ﷺ, was to steal, I would chop off her hand. That anger wasn't connected to his own personal situation. That was when a law of Allah Azza wa Jal was being transgressed. How many laws of Allah do we see being transgressed day in, day out, fair game, and it affects us nothing, not a jot, not an iota. Yet if someone cuts us up in the traffic, then we will be effing and blinding and screaming till the cows come home. Who are we connected to? Are we connected to the justice of Allah Azza wa Jal? Are we connected to our own nafs? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was also humble. And this is a characteristic of a man, a real man. When he came to the conquest of Makkah. Now in Makkah, can you imagine the land, the birthland of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he was brought up, he was nurtured and loved, when he had to flee it, and they threatened to kill him, and everything that he had, and when he came back as the victor, how did he enter into Makkah? The Prophet ﷺ was riding his camel, his head was so low that his beard was touching the back of the neck, and he was reciting Surah Fatiha. Indeed, Allah has given us an honor. Head lowered. In victory. In victory. How do we behave when we win something? Or when we have some small gains? Humility. Humility. Ali radiallahu anhu, famous example of his when he was in a battle. When he had the enemy at the end of his sword. He was about to strike him. And the enemy spat at him. And Ali radiallahu anhu let him go. So come back to the thing about anger. He had him there, he was his enemy and that person would have killed him, but he spat at him, and what did he do? He let him go. The person said, what's wrong with you? You're going to kill me, and after I spat at you, I thought you definitely would have killed me. He said, before I was going to kill you for Allah Azza wa Jal's sake, but when you spat at me, I would have killed you for my sake. Men, real men, they can control their anger. Patience, perseverance, gentleness. Another key characteristic of men, and we know from even business and general management, the best leaders are those who create other leaders. The best leaders are those who create other leaders. So if you look at like Man United, Sir Alex Ferguson, he's created loads of other good managers, yeah? So look, good leaders are those who create other good leaders. And so we as men should raise our children to be men. Give them lofty aspirations. We know in the Battle of Badr, the two sons of Afra, one of the companions, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf was standing there. And next to him were these two young lads. And from the hadith we'd say that the age was between 12 and 13. And they said to him, either side of him, they go, where's Abu Jahl? Abdul Rahman ibn Auf says to them, why, what are you going to do? They said, don't worry about that. You just tell us where Abu Jahl is. Leave the rest to us. Abdurrahman ibn Auf, he goes, alright, subhanAllah. And he pointed him out. These were young guys, 12, 13 years old. And they wanted to go for the big fish, Abu Jahl. And they went and they struck him down. Because they had that mentality. They had that vision. They had something instilled in them to be men. And Abu Jahl, by the way, he was a huge guy. He was massive. But do you know who gave him the fatal blow? Does anyone know? It was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was talking about real men. And we don't want to Khattab was a big guy, but Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he was a very slender person. His legs were very thin. Skinny guy. And when he was climbing a tree once, the other Sahaba used to laugh at him. And the Prophet Muhammad said, he goes, don't laugh at him. By Allah, his legs are heavier than the Mount of Uhud on the Day of Judgment. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he wasn't a big character. He wasn't someone who's huge, like these, biceps were thinking, a huge guy who's strong. Small guy. And he jumped on top of Abu Jahl. And Abu Jahl, at that moment, he turned left, right, and he goes, anyone but him. Because he knew, he goes, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was a small guy. He wasn't known to be a warrior. And he's looking left and goes, please, anyone but him. But Allah wanted him to die at the sword of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. So it's character that will make you a man. That you step forward when others stay behind. And you step up to do what's right. And again, the Battle of Uhud. Abu Rafi, he interceded for his children, his son Rafi. Because at that time the Prophet Muhammad said, no, the youngsters, these guys who are 12, they can't take part. And Abu Rafi, he interceded, he goes, Ya Rasulullah, my son's really good at archery. Let him take part. So the Prophet said, okay. But then Samura complained, he was another guy, his friend. He goes, but I can beat him in wrestling. I can beat him in wrestling. So the Prophet said, okay, you guys fight. And one of the riwayat that I heard, someone actually said to Rafi, he goes, let me beat you. Because he really wanted to take part. And they wrestled and Samura won. So the Prophet said, okay, you can both take part. But the key thing was Abu Rafi. He wanted his son to take part. He didn't wrap up his son in cotton wool. How we raise our children, we want to protect them, But in doing so, we're affecting that whole generation. Umar ibn Khattab said, teach your children archery, to horse ride, to swim. The Prophet Muhammad said this is a sunnah, to wrestle, to horse ride, to do archery. And so inshallah, I want to conclude inshallah by talking about the greatest example of all time of a man. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who is the perfection of everything we want from being men. And I chose certain examples, and these are all from the hadith of Anas ibn Malik. Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu lived with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So he had insight into things that perhaps some of the other companions didn't. And he said one thing about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So now we've spoken about men who they're firm in their ground. They don't waver, they don't change their decisions based on personal whims. And he said that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he used to leave to do something, nothing would deter him from fulfilling that action. So Anas ibn Malik used to go with him. Let's go through the market, do everything that they needed to do. Because nothing would deter the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ from doing what he needed to do. Except what? He said that whenever the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was walking, and a little girl would hold his hand, the Prophet ﷺ would go with her wherever she pulled him. Prophet ﷺ, he'd stop whatever he's doing with small children. And small girls, particularly if they held him, he'd play with them and go along with that. He's a real man. And look how gentle he was. The Prophet ﷺ was brave. One example, Anas ibn Malik said that they were with the companions and they heard a loud bang that shook everyone. So they all rushed out. And they said the first person upon the horse with the sword on his back was the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he said to everyone else, it's okay, go back, it's okay. I'll deal with it. Not the last. Not you guys go first, check it out. The Prophet was the first one who's already on the horse. He was brave. The Prophet was noble. Something perhaps we don't fully appreciate in our time, what nobility is. And they said that whenever he'd shake hands with someone, he wouldn't leave his hand first. It's a noble thing. But never pull his hand away. How to treat someone else. The Prophet was generous. They say that he used to give like he didn't fear poverty. This is how the Prophet used to give like he didn't fear poverty. And this is a person, they say, subhanAllah, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that in his house that a fire wasn't lit for 3 months. That he didn't eat properly for 3 months. He used to still give as if he didn't fear poverty. But we cling on to it like it's going to save us. The Prophet was also a man by his ibadah. He used to love ibadah. Whenever he used to go and visit someone's house, he used to always pray 2 rak'ah. He was addicted to ibadah. Something else, our example of the Prophet ﷺ. What's our relationship with ibadah? And he was gentle. Again, subhanAllah, Anas ibn Malik said, I lived with Rasulullah ﷺ for 10 years. He never hit me, never scolded me, nor did he ever frown at me. Now all of us as men, think about how we treat our women and our children. How we behave with our mothers, our wives, our sisters, our children. Do you think the Prophet ﷺ didn't have the same issues? But he never got upset the way we do. It's as if we take out everything we've built up in the day on them. But something else, if you look through hadith, you look through Quran, Allah Azza wa Jalla is always talking about protecting the rights of women, protecting the rights of the weak, protecting the rights of children. Why? Even the Prophet Muhammad on his deathbed, he said, As-salah, 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 and look after your women folk. He said this, imagine on his deathbed. Why did Allah Azza wa Jalla not talk about men in the same way? Because Allah has created us to be able to handle this. If we were to know and we were to behave like men. Allah has given us the capacity. We have to just deal with it. We don't start arguing like women with them. Be men. So I finish, inshallah, by saying, wallahi, the deen is in front of everyone. Everyone knows the state of Muslims, what's happening. And we have so much work to do. Wallahi, every single day this deen is being attacked on all sorts of fronts. It's not just physically, ideologically. They're diluting this deen, where they're allowing, saying women can lead the salah. So equality. They're saying the seerah, hadith is no longer important. What will the state of the deen be in a few years if we don't put our defences up now? So I finish with a statement of Umar radiallahu anhu. And he said, learn before you lead. Learn before you lead. And Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu said, we are the best of mankind, created to lead mankind. So it's incumbent upon each and every single one of us as men that we are leaders of some sort or another. Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us in the Quran that we have made you qawamun. The Prophet Muhammad told us we are all leaders of one form or another. Whether it be for our own families, that we're shepherds and we have to lead them. So when we say learn before you lead, then we need to study this deen. Understand this deen. Know the seerah. Know what Allah Azza wa Jalla wants from us. That will give us the ability to deal with whatever Allah throws at us. Whatever fitna comes from this dunya. That knowledge is what we will rely on and give us the tawakkul. And there's no days off. The seerah is open for all of us. Every single thing about the Prophet Muhammad, from the way he went to the toilet to the way he was with his wives, we know. But you know what you will not find in the seerah? day off. The Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba never took days off. And this is the attitude that we should have. That from now until the moment we end up in our grave, that we're working towards pleasing Allah Azza wa Jal and bringing back the light to this deen that Allah Azza wa Jal deserves. That Allah deserves the worship. And we need to be ready to do that. And we need to be bringing people back to the worship of Allah. Who else are we going to rely on? وآخر دعوانا والحمد لله رب العالمين.